Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kari, and today I'm going to be talking about my spring TBR. So basically all the books that I'm going to be reading between now and like the end of May. So I'm going to be talking about 15 books that are definitely going to be on my TBR through the end of May, but there's also some other books that could be added along the way through the next couple of months, but I don't know what they are yet, and I'll give you more details about that, what I'm even referring to in a minute. So I've divided these 15 books up into 4 different categories, and the first category of books is going to be International Booker Longlist books. The International Booker Longlist was just announced like a week ago, I think. And I've actually never followed the International Booker before. I just randomly saw some videos about it, and it made me really excited to follow it. As you may know, I already follow the Women's Prize for Fiction, which I'll get to in a minute. So I do already love the excitement of following prizes. And then after learning a little bit more about the International Booker, I was like, this prize sounds amazing. Like, let's follow this prize as well. Because when the long list was announced, a lot of the books sounded super interesting and really intrigued me to follow along. So I have 3 books here from the long list. Their long list is 13 books, whereas the Women's Prize is 16 books, so their long list is a bit shorter. And these are the 3 that intrigued me the most. The first book that intrigued me from the International Booker long list is Mother Dead by Vigdis Hjorth. I'm definitely not saying that right, but this is translated from the Norwegian. Basically, what I know about this book so far is that it's about an adult daughter and her mother and their strained relationship that they have. Because this adult daughter, she's an artist, and she makes kind of controversial art about motherhood, and her mom really takes it personally, and so it's really affecting their mother-daughter relationship. On the inside of the dust jacket, it says it's a cat and mouse game of psychological torment, so that sounds fantastic. I'm really looking forward to this one. The next International Booker longlist book that I want to read is The Birthday Party by Laurent Mauvignier, and this one's translated from the French. So this takes place in an isolated village in France, and personally, I love the tiny little villages of France. They're so charming and so cute, so I love the idea of a book taking place in one of these little towns. But this story is definitely not going to be a cozy story, because this is about a man who throws a birthday party for his wife, but some scary things start to happen. He starts to receive some like menacing letters, and like people are lurking around his house, and a bunch of just really creepy stuff starts to happen. So obviously the birthday party is not going to go well, I imagine. So whereas Is Mother Dead is more like literary fiction, I would say that this one is more like suspense, mystery, maybe thriller, although I've heard that this one's kind of slow paced, so maybe it wouldn't be considered a thriller, but it's definitely mystery, and I think it sounds so good, especially for the fact that it takes place in the French countryside, which I love. Then another Fitzcarraldo publisher book that was nominated is Stillborn by Guadalupe Nettel, and this is translated from the Spanish. By the way, these are the first 2 Fitzcarraldo editions, these like blue covers, that I've ever gotten, and I'm in love with these. I've seen them around in bookstores here in Paris because it's a UK publisher, and so they're quite common here in France, and I never really understood what they were, but now that I see that they're like really prestigious, you know, being nominated for the International Booker, like a bunch, I think there's like 4 books that are nominated for the International Booker this year that are published by Fitzcarraldo. Like, clearly this is a really distinguished publishing house, so now I'm really interested in them. So if you have any good Fitzcarraldo recommendations, put them in the comments. I would love to hear them. So anyway, Stillborn is about 2 women who think that they don't want to be mothers. One of them even gets sterilized, so she really can't have babies, and the other one has just said, I don't want to have a child. But then over time, they start to question, do I in fact want to have a child? So as you can see, similar to the Is Mother Dead book that I already talked about, motherhood and having children is a really big theme on the long list this year, which I love reading about that. So I'm really interested to get into this one. So those are the 3 books that are longlisted for the International Booker that I'm the most interested in. However, I am also interested in a few other ones. So if I finish these ones and I'm looking for another book, I might move on to these next ones that I'm going to mention. Or if these ones that I'm going to mention are shortlisted, I'm definitely going to read them. So the ones that I'm also interested in but I haven't bought yet are A System So Magnificent It Is Blinding, Standing Heavy, Boulder, Whale, and Time Shelter. So these 5 books, like I said, I am interested in. If I have time, I would love to get to them. If they're shortlisted, I would even more love to get to them. If you've read any of these books or any of the other books that have been longlisted and you loved it, definitely let me know. Put it in the comments. I would love to know, because so many of these books sound incredible and I would love to get to them. All right, my next group of books that I have on my TBR are Women's Prize for Fiction longlist books. So I have talked about this before, so I will keep it brief, but I am going to be reading the entire shortlist for the Women's Prize this year. But I have picked up a good few of the books on the long list that I'm definitely interested in no matter what, even if they're not shortlisted. And maybe if I'm lucky, some of these books will be shortlisted, and then that's one less book that I have to read off of the shortlist. So the first book from the long list that I'm definitely going to be reading, I had to pre-order because I wanted the US edition, and that's Cursed Bread. Basically, this book follows the wife of a baker, and something happens where like the wheat or somehow all of the bread products in town get poisoned, and so obviously that's going to have really bad consequences on the entire town that they get poisoned, and kind of seeing the effects of that. But from what I've heard so far, it's kind of giving me Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason or Vladimir by Julia May Jonas vibes, and as you probably know, I love those two books, so I'm really interested in this one, but I have to wait for the pre-order to come in since I want this beautiful cover. The next book from the Women's Prize for Fiction long list that I'm definitely going to be reading is I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. So this book follows a woman who's having an affair with a married man, but this married man is not only having an affair with our main character, but also someone else. So he has a wife and two mistresses, and the main character that we're following, she's obsessed with his wife and his other mistress, and she's like stalking them on Instagram. So from what I understand, this is really like a social media book. Like, what does social media do to us and like the obsession that it can give people. I've heard pretty good things about this one. Next is another book that I've only heard incredible things about, so I'm really looking forward to reading it, and that's Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. Apparently this is a retelling of Charles Dickens' David Copperfield, but a lot of people have said you don't need to know the story of David Copperfield to appreciate this story, so I'm going in blind, not knowing anything about David Copperfield, and all I really know about this one is that it takes place in the Appalachians and that it deals with the opioid crisis. So that theme, and also that I've only heard excellent things about it, I'm really looking forward to this, despite the fact that it's very, very long. The next book from the Women's Prize for Fiction long list that I'm going to be reading is Children of Paradise by Camille Grudova. So this one follows a woman who gets a job at a cinema and things start to get kind of weird. The Women's Prize for Fiction said that it's hallucinatory, and that sounded really intriguing to me, but I think that once she starts working at the cinema, her co-workers are like really bizarre, and things just start to get weirder and weirder. That's kind of the understanding that I have about this book, so that sounds really good. And the last book that I'm definitely going to be reading from the long list is The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. So obviously this is a super well-known book even before the long list, and I've been wanting to read it for a really long time, so I'm glad that I finally have the excuse to read it. Basically, this is historical fiction about someone in the Medici family. I don't know the real story that this is based on, but it has something to do with like a man plotting to kill his wife, the wife being the Medici woman. I don't know too much about this. I don't want to know too much about it. I just know I've heard really excellent things, and I'm excited to read it. So those are all the books that I'm definitely going to be reading from the Women's Prize for Fiction long list. And then when the shortlist is announced, I think it's April 26th that the shortlist is announced. Whatever books that are put onto the shortlist that I haven't read yet, that I haven't just talked about, I'll definitely be getting those and reading those. So these are the books that have been longlisted that I don't have definite plans to read yet. So if any of these are shortlisted, I'll definitely be reading them. The ones that I'm the most interested in, and I would be really happy that they're shortlisted because then I'd have more excuse to read them, are Homesick and Pod. Homesick is about a relationship between two sisters that sounds really interesting, and it was marketed as a memoir in the US, so I'm really curious to see how is it fictionalized to be nominated for a fiction prize. And I'm also kind of interested in Pod. It's from the point of view of a dolphin, but what's really selling me is this beautiful cover. You know me, I love a beautiful cover. I can be convinced by a beautiful cover, but this author's previous book is from the point of view of a bee, and apparently it's incredible, so I imagine that this one has to be pretty good as well. One of these books that I'm really kind of hoping isn't shortlist is Glory, because I've heard that it's kind of like Animal Farm, and maybe this is a hot take, but I hate Animal Farm. I really dislike Animal Farm. George Orwell fans, don't come for me because I freaking love 1984. It's one of my favorite books of all time, but Animal Farm is not it. I don't want to read Glory because it's been compared to Animal Farm so much, so I'm really hoping that it's not shortlisted, but if it is, I'll be reading it and I'll be giving it a chance. If it gets shortlisted, I'm going to need a little bit of coaxing to encourage me to pick it up, so if you've read Glory and you liked it, definitely let me know, but also if you've read any of these books from the long list yet, definitely let me know. Tell me what you think. Have you loved anything yet? Tell me all your thoughts about the Women's Prize in the comments. My third category of books are just books that I want to read. They're not for any prize or anything like that. They're just books that I'm interested in reading. And the first one is Big Swiss by Jen Beagin. This is about someone who transcribes sessions for a sex therapist. Like, she's not there in the room, it's just that the therapist records it and then she has to transcribe it at home. And so obviously this therapist has a lot of different patients, but this transcriber becomes really obsessed with one of his patients in particular, particular, and she nicknames this patient Big Swiss because she's tall and blonde and from Switzerland. Then one day the main character is at a dog park and she hears this woman talking at the dog park, and she realizes that it's Big Swiss because she's heard her voice so much that she can recognize this woman's voice. And so the story kind of takes off when she ends up introducing herself to Big Swiss. And I've said it before, but I'll say it again, I love this cover. The next book that I really want to read this spring is The Protégé by Jody Gehrman. So this is a thriller that takes place at a university. There's two timelines, I think, one from a professor and one from one of her graduate students. And basically all I know about the story is that it's a story of revenge, and it's being compared to Samantha Downing's books, which I really appreciate Samantha Downing's books, so I'm really looking forward to this one. And I'm really excited about the fact that it takes place at a university because I love stories that take place in academic settings. Next is a short story collection called Out There by Kate Folk. Normally I'm not someone who really enjoys short stories, but I've heard really excellent things about this one, so I really have high hopes that I'm going to enjoy this one. I really hope that I do. I'm really looking for a short story collection that I love. I just want that for myself, so I hope that this is going to be that. This next book I talked about in my book haul that I've already started reading it, but it's something that I'm just dipping in and out of, so I'll definitely be doing that through the next couple of months, and that's The Heart of Yoga by TKV Desikachar. It's just a book about some of the philosophies of yoga and learning more and more about yoga, and as I'm a beginner, I want to learn as much as possible, so I'll definitely be dipping in and out of this one through May. My fourth group of books on my TBR are rereads. So the first thing that I want to reread this spring is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. So this is something that I read for the first time in 2020, so obviously it's been a good 3 years since I read it, and I really just want to read it again. It's just really fun, and I remember loving the nonsense language in it. Like, it's definitely not just for kids. Like, there's jokes and wordplay in the story that kids, it would go way over their head. Like, it's definitely for adults. And so it's just a really good time. I'm looking forward to rereading this. And another book that I want to reread is actually something from the very first time that I read books from the long list for the Women's Prize for Fiction. I started following it in 2021, and this is one of the books I picked up for that I was so interested in, and then it ended up going on to win the Women's Prize that year, and I was so happy that the first year that I started following the Women's Prize, my prediction won. And then after it won the Women's Prize, it just absolutely blew up online and everyone was reading it. And so anyway, it's been a while since I read it and I just want to reread it. It's a fast read, and that's of course Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. You've probably already heard so many things about this book, but if you haven't read Piranesi yet, I would definitely recommend it. People who love many different genres of books have really appreciated Piranesi, so I think anybody could love this book, and I'm really excited to reread it. I have one more book that I'm planning to start reading this spring that didn't fit into any of the 4 categories, and that's Les Misérables by Victor Hugo. I'm going to be buddy reading this with Ania from Ania's Bell Jar, so I'm going to link her channel down below. You should definitely check her out. We're going to be reading this over May and June because this is a super long book. My edition here is 1,300 pages, so it's going to take a while to read. So I will be starting this technically in the spring at the beginning of May, but it will be continuing into summer in June. So anyway, I'm super excited to finally start reading this, but I'll be honest with you, I'm very intimidated. I mean, this will be the longest book that I've ever read, and I'm scared. But luckily, since I am doing this with Ania, I think that that's going to be super helpful, that I'm going to have somebody there motivating me to get through this, and I think it will make the experience even more fun. So that's Les Mis. Alright, so those are all the books that I'm planning on reading over the next couple of months, including some contingencies depending on what makes the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist, and if any of the other books that I'm interested for the International Booker make the shortlist. I will be adding some other books to this list. It just depends what happens with those prizes. I would love to know all your thoughts about the Women's Prize for Fiction and the International Booker in the comments. I would love to chat with you about it. And if you have any thoughts about any of the other books that I plan on reading, definitely let me know. Just don't tell me if you didn't like it, because I am excited about all these books and I don't want to lose excitement if you didn't like it, but we can talk about that after I do my recent reads video for these books. And with all that being said, if you like this video, please give it a like. I would really appreciate it, and subscribe if you haven't already. I would love to have you back, and I'll talk to you again next time. Bye!